Good morning. God bless. What is great, good, and real? Let me get my docs open before I get busy here. All right. I wanted to come on today because it's Saturday. Saturday is reflection day for me. And ironically, I was reflecting over the course of the week about my reflection, and I thought I would talk about the conversations we might avoid when things go quiet. And this hit me while I was waiting for my son in the car the other day for after school pickup. And it got me to thinking about some of the things we generally do as people and how we could sort of maximize our time and how it could be instrumental for your life. So I wanted to share a practice that I have invoked and adopted over the course of about the last 4 to 5 years. And I referenced the time frame because time is significant in that it doesn't take much time to do this, but you want to compound time. We talked about the temporal dominance that is relevant for our lives around consciousness. Ironically, today I read something that said, if you really think about consciousness and the way thought works, if you just looked at it as thought A, thought B, thought C, you can't get to thought C without B and A each precede and succeed one another. In that way, consciousness is like this unbroken stream. Now, of course, we have time that tells us there's morning, afternoon, evening. We go to sleep, we wake up, we perform all these things. But in that way, our lives sort of persist and insist consciously, almost in unity and in harmony. Of course, relative, right? Things break streams of thought. All thought isn't the same, but all thought is the same relative to when you come to a conclusion consciously. You couldn't have come to the conclusion the way you can't put a period at the end of a sentence without all the words that of course, formulate the sentence. So I want you to think about how you might be able to introduce this practice into your life. I'll talk about how I sort of implement it in a moment, and then what I actually do through it, and hopefully it's of great benefit to you. The idea is to find a small amount of time. Again, I think 5 minutes is more than enough. And I think if you ever put a timer on for 5 minutes and you sat in silence, that's another sort of reality you have to come to. It's silent time. So I look for 5 minutes, and I do this always when I wake up, always before I go to sleep, and then I look for a moment of time throughout the course of the day. It could be when you're in the car. I think that's a great time. When you're in the car, if you think about being in a car by yourself, if you travel publicly, I get it, that's difficult. Maybe headphones would suffice, but I would tell you turn on the noise cancellation without putting noise in it. The idea is silent time with no noise. I also think about this when I go to the restroom, right? I bring my phone with me. Don't bring your phone with you. When you wake up, when you go to sleep, in the car, maybe sometime when you hit the head, right? A military term, when you hit the head. But when can you be alone to give yourself time to think without being interrupted? Here's what I start to consider. Gratitude. It's a great practice. What is usually occurring, or what is occurring over the course of time in our lives? You're living. Life is complex. It offers all its relational complexities. You are where you are in your life relationally. You identify with your relationships relative to what your relationships offer. You have intimate relationships, you have friendships, you have business endeavors, you complete who you are identity-wise in varying degrees. So when you give yourself time to think, I like to practice gratitude as soon as I wake up and right before I go to sleep, because if you think about conscious streams and the reality that consciousness persists, then I take advantage of how the subconscious works and how my unconscious works and how my awareness of consciousness works, that as soon as I wake up and before I go to sleep, if I practice the same things consciously, well, then it carries itself throughout the course of time, at least for me and how I live, functionally in a logical way that is successive and impactful in positivity. If I wake up grateful and if I go to sleep grateful, then the logic says in between those time periods, I'll find more time to be grateful. What are you grateful for? What are you grateful for? Ask yourself right now, what are you grateful for? I think relative to how we live, the existential crisis of our lives and the identity pull to correlate what we feel and what we think with what we see. I've talked about this ad nauseum. The visual sight, the stimulus of visual and seeing is 80% of how we interpret our lives. So sometimes what we see and what we see and what we see, they deeply conflict. And that's what causes us pain. And that's what causes us to be less grateful than we might think we are. And I also realized when I came to gratitude and consciousness of being grateful, that I wasn't as grateful for the things I could be grateful for as I thought I was. Because certainly you wake up, your movement consciously implies you're grateful. Because whether you complain about your day or not, you're going through your day. So you are grateful to be alive. You are grateful to live in your life, and you are grateful to have outcomes, whether or not the outcomes are ideal or not. So let's just digress from that point and accept that as a baseline boundary for fundamental acceptance of gratitude. So now I'm in the car. I'm waiting for my son. I was about to turn on Spotify. And what I realized at that moment was I had broken a habit that I had been practicing for a while. When I'm in the car alone, I don't turn on any sort of stimulus. I don't listen to anything. And I've been doing that over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. Now, contextually, we know that context changes, and you come to consciousness when things are provoked and invoked to change context. So there is a time where silence becomes difficult, like repeating the same thing again becomes redundant and is painful in that way because the euphoria of coming to that state of consciousness dissipates. The way I talked about recently with God. Prayer, when you first reignite prayer, feels great. You start stretching prayer out over the course of 4, 5, 6, 7 years. You realize I got to change the way I pray every now and again to change the stimulus of consciousness related to it so that I can be sort of ignited towards gratefulness and gratitude again. So, okay. I realized at that moment when I reached for the button, you've been turning on Spotify a little bit too much. And the reason why that was significant was because it stops you, Jeff, from thinking. And when you stop yourself from thinking, I realized over the course of time, I become more frustrated in my life. I become less disciplined with my thoughts and how I emotionally encounter gratitude. It's just life. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you can understand. Maybe you can relate. So I want to stop turning on Spotify because I want to stop the stimulus. We talked about crack fluence recently. The dopamine rush. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just acknowledging it. I don't want to be stimulated by sound. I'd rather be stimulated by my thoughts. Why? When I come to consciousness enough, and when I bring myself to that reality enough, when I look at my thoughts that are persisting and insisting, sort of like it's not like a train more than it is like an ocean. It's just constant, right? And an ocean is like you're never standing in the same water twice. The water's always moving and flowing, but at the same time, there's this vast, vast space that is really creates a lot of depth more than it does in ascendance. And I thought was powerful when Jung talked about the psyche, that God descended upon us for us to ascend upon God. But if you think about it, God descended. And before you can ascend to higher consciousness, you got to go back into the depths, descend into yourself. That's what thinking allows you to do. That's what thinking allows us to do, right? So I'm in the car. I don't press the button. That's significant because I pause and I interrupt the dopamine rush of turn that on to get away from yourself. That's what I don't want to do too often, although sometimes it is rewarding because if you go too deeply into yourself, you can frustrate yourself because you start thinking things and ruminating. You want to give yourself breath every now and again to get away from yourself. So the stimulus can be good. The point being, again, identifying it. I've been listening to it too much. I got to pause right here. I want to get into a gratitude practice. 5 minutes. What am I grateful for? I'm grateful that I was able to not press the button. I'm grateful that I'm able to think these thoughts. I'm grateful for my breath. I'm grateful for my bodily organs. My heart happens to be beating right now. My liver is functioning to capacity. For someone like me who is, I drank for a very long time. I don't know how much damage I've done to it, but right now I know it's working very well. I get my lab results. My blood is beautiful. Sounds insignificant, but without it, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And at some juncture, the unspoken truth that we all know and live with is that eventually all these things will stop. One day my heart will stop beating, my liver will stop livering, my breath will stop breathing, and I will cease to exist in this physical reality. We can talk another day about what I think happens after that, but that's not for today. But what are you grateful for? I'm grateful I could put my hands on the steering wheel. I'm grateful I could sit in this car. There was a time I didn't have a car. I'm grateful I could press a button and heat turns on. And now you start to sort of unpack this and you travel backwards in time in your mind. I'm grateful I can pick my son up and that he's likely to be very healthy and happy and safe. I can go back into a safe home that has heat. It was 0 degrees the other day. I'm grateful it was 0 degrees so I could have heat to turn on. All these things are not insignificant. It gives you a baseline for which to balance the rest of your life off of, to either give more significance to other things or give less significance to other things. I'm not saying that this should be the most fundamental and sufficient thing to allow you to be, or to persevere and strengthen and power through your life and gain and manifest things in different ways. But fundamentally speaking, yes, having core values around, I have a gratitude practice. What are you grateful for? I am grateful that I can cash a check every week or two. I am grateful that I have a place I can clock in and clock out. Let's not get into yet the realities around how fulfilling these are. And I'm not trying to also be superfluous around how deep I go into the gratitude practice, but I do think it requires a level of depth around how deep do you want to be grateful? How fundamental can you be into the baseline that expands out? So if I'm grateful I have breath, I'm grateful for my body, I'm grateful I can think things, right? I'm grateful I can see things, I'm grateful I can interpret things. And now everything that comes along with carrying my identity, which is required to help I understand how I feel fulfilled. I'm grateful for the mic, I'm grateful for the subscribers, on and on and on and on and on again. One of the things I'll close this part with is back to how I start and end my day. I wake up and go to sleep in prayer. So much so that I don't have to think about when I wake up, thank you, God. I'm telling you, I've been talking about this on the channel since I started really trying to make this channel. Thank you, God, I'm alive today. I wake up, as soon as I wake up, before I even understand I'm thinking, I hear in my head, thank you, God, I'm alive today. 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 When I go to sleep, thank you, God, I was alive. I'm alive today. I made it through this day. Thank you, God, for the continued peace, love, health, happiness, and safety. I pray on my house address. I pray on my wife's name. I pray on my daughter's name. I pray on my son's name. That's how I fall asleep. That's how I wake up. That's what helps carry me through the day. It's not to suggest that I don't get frustrated. It's not to suggest that I don't unravel and have explosions. It's not to suggest that I don't have periods of anxiety and stress and overwhelm. I do. But this certainly helps fundamentally unwind some of the stress that comes in inevitably, and if nothing else, gives contrast. Consciousness constantly needs contrast to be able to establish itself in a way that doesn't put you to sleep, and that you don't sort of get into this reality where you're not making progress anymore in your life. Think about that a lot of us have reached the point of sort of stability and comfort and inertia around things just work, so I keep them that way. I might complain about it, which we'll get into next, but I might have also forgotten why I should be grateful. And that, I'll close with this, right? If you feel uncomfortable in your life today, with your position in your career, with your relationship, with your environment, with anything that is in your life causing you conflict, remember that you prayed for this life at one point. That exactly where you are today, whether you realize it or not, whether you came to consciousness or not, whether you said, God, get me here or not, please put me here, you wanted the exact life you have right now. You said to yourself, if I could just get this job, if I could just get this apartment or get this house or get this car or have this relationship and have this family, I would feel very good about where I'm at. And if we just allow that to be true for ourselves, then we can agree we don't have to accept to stay there. But we did pray for it at one point. For that reason alone, we should be grateful. Also, we know we're going to expire. I'm happy I'm alive today. Now, there's an alternate reality that I also consider all the time. for no other reason than to give myself conflicting and contrasting conscious thoughts so I can remember and remind myself why I might want to be more grateful than not. Look, you could be very unhappy about what gets deposited into your bank every week or two. You could be very unhappy about, I'm not really fulfilled in my career. My boss is an asshole. I'm not really thriving in my relationships. My marriage is sort of flatlined. Fundamentally with God or my faith, I'm just kind of there. Nothing is working for me the way I want it to work. I'm very uncomfortable in my life. This is not the way I drew it up. This is not the way I scripted it. And all these things are having a negative impact on my life. Cool. At some juncture, you can be grateful to accept that too. It may not sound like what you want to hear, but at what point do you continue to repeat that? At what point do you pick up the phone and have the same arguments? At what point do you send the same texts, are in the same circles, are complaining about the same things and do nothing about it? There's something you could do about that, which will bring peace and ease and gratitude to your mind, is accept that I may not be happy with this paycheck. My boss might be who my boss is. My friend circle and my circle might be what they are. My environment is my environment. None of that is going to change around you because you decide you want to change. You can change how you feel about it. You can accept that. It may not be the truth and it may be harsh in some ways. I understand there's a reality of that. But what's the alternative? The check's not going to change. You're going to still complain about it? Your relationship is not going to change if you just complain about it and do nothing about it. At that juncture, go through that in your mind. Take those 5 minutes in the car when you wake up, before you go to sleep, or when you go into the bathroom. Don't bring your phone with you. Think about that. And at least if you come to the conscious realization of, well, this is what it is, maybe you can go back to, well, I did pray for this. I am here. Guess what? I don't feel like changing. That to me is the resolve. So what we want to think about too is conflict resolution. If you've reached the reality where you're not very satisfied with what you got and you would prefer more, but you don't really want to do more to get more, we know that the cliche is nothing changes if nothing changes. If you're not going to decide to change, accept that you're not going to decide to change, and then everything that's not going to change around you will feel better. Why? Because you've come to the conclusion consciously that you're not going to change. But to complain about it, to be frustrated with it, and to not sit through it and just be accepting of it, I don't understand how that's not just plain madness and irrational and illogical, right? Then there's this other reality of why I think this is significant and important. If you can come to consciousness that you don't like your check, that you are frustrated with your boss, that you aren't in the career space you want to be in, that your relationships aren't thriving, that your most intimate connections are somewhat dissolving, then come to that realization, come to that level of consciousness, and then think through what to do. If you are unhappy with your paycheck right now, there's nothing stopping you from approaching your boss and saying, boss, sir, ma'am, or however it is accepted generally in today's society, I want a raise. And you might get the answer that you don't warrant a raise. Okay, but at least you know. The next question is then, what do I have to do for a raise? What do I have to do for a promotion? Understand these things, but at least there's a short-term understanding of, I'm at a friction point. Here's a resolve. Here's a solution. Let me go try this. And now if your boss tells you you don't rank and you don't rate, then now there's another possibility. Maybe I should leave. It might take longer, but at least you understand where you stand. At least you start the process. Or maybe while I'm accepting this and there's no end in sight for how this is going to go, this situation may not change. Just like that sometimes. Sometimes you have to come to a reality that this scenario I'm in, I've gotten everything I can from it. The people around me are not going to really change their perception of me no matter what I do, because changing the perception, especially in business, right, is awfully complex. A lot of times people accept you at the level that you're at. Difficult to get a promotion, especially if you spend a lot of time there. So what's my reality? You probably got to change environments. And if you're going to stay there, accept it's not going to change, what can you work on? That thought you had about what you could do to change your individual position in life, whether it's more prosperous for self-attainment, a business, a collaboration, a different line of work, a different goal. At least now, if you're going to stay there, you could put your time towards, well, while I'm staying here, and relatively speaking, when you're in a state like that in a business environment, y'all want a raise. Nope. Y'all want a promotion. Nope. All right, cool. Then what you're doing is usually enough to maintain where you're at. So you already know what it takes, and it usually doesn't take a lot. I know what it takes in the business world. Most people aren't putting in 40 hours a week, even when they put in 40 hours a week. You got time. So in that downtime, you could be working on the separate you. But to sit there, go through that scenario, think it through, and not have an outcome that you can change means that you can't change it. And why sit in that state? Relationally, where are you at with your intimacy in your most intimate relationships? When's the last time you spoke about intimacy? It's uncomfortable, I know. And intimacy doesn't always have to be sexual in nature, but just having an intimate conversation. Really asking your significant other and your partner, yo, how are you doing today? So while you're thinking about you, what eventually happens in this time of constantly thinking about yourself is, what makes you you besides the things you just do for you? I know, the I, the me, the ego, necessary. Without it, you wouldn't identify. We've talked about that before, significant. But also, other I's and other me's make you you. Are you contributing to the maximum capacity in those relationships? The answer is likely no. And that's okay. That gives you something to work towards. It starts to change your context around hierarchy for goals. You'll find yourself inspired when there's something to do, to find something to do, to get better at doing the things you want to do. And then that all ties back, of course, back into the gratitude practice. These things are not inconsequential. In fact, they're massively consequential for your life and how you're able to grow consciously and how you're able to grow spiritually and how you're able to do things and sort of reorient around a new lifestyle for yourself, a new identity for yourself. Go through those things. You can be grateful. You can accept that you're ungrateful and that's your life. And you can, Mara, how are you? You know, I secretly thought about you. I said, man, I haven't heard from Mara in a while. I wonder if I pop on live today, if she'll show up. I'm glad you caught me. I'm glad I caught you. There's another gentleman that's been joining my lives recently. I've only done this now 3 times in the last week or so. I've been inundating myself with recorded content. That coming on has been a little less of a priority, but it's good to see you. I hope you are blessed. I hope life is treating you well. We're talking about all these kinds of states of consciousness. If you remember, I think back to this time last year, it's the end of January 2026. Good to hear you're good. Good to hear you're good. I hope everything stays blessed in your life. So at this time last year, I was going live pretty much every morning for 100 days straight. That was the challenge I gave myself. So when we talk about reflection, Saturday is my reflection day. What we talked about today is a gratitude practice or just a practice in general when you give yourself time to think of yourself. And then if you're going to accept where you are consciously in your life, in your relationships with what you are, you're not going to make changes. That gives you a balance. You can be a little more emotionally stable around, all right, I've decided I'm not going to change. I'm going to be accepting. That's also having a level of gratitude. Then I'm thinking about all these things and I want to change some things. What can I do in the immediacy of life to change some things? Oh, I am immensely blessed. I was just telling somebody the other day, I still get asked this. What does it mean to be blessed? Sometimes I feel so blessed it's uncomfortable how blessed I am. And it's not because I don't struggle. I struggle a lot. I struggle immensely to maintain my blessings. But, oh my God, as far as personally, I have 2 teenagers now, 16 and 13. My daughter's 16, my son is 13. My wife's going to hit 45. I'll hit 45 this year too. So milestones are happening in life. Milestones are happening. So it's great. It's great. Everything is good. My relationship with God is great. My relationship at home is great. My relationship at work is great. My relationship with the channel is great. And that's about all I got. I keep it there in that circle. But thank you, Mara. So yeah, think about these things. And then think about this, like, you know, the relationship with Mara that I have that goes back over a year. If you think about it, I know she started joining the lives at some juncture. But how did I sort of evolve from this thing? Where did I go? What was my primary thought consciously? It's still in the same realm. I'm still doing the same things. I'm still focusing on my relationships. I'm still figuring out where gratitude lies. But I have to change the context of what I'm grateful for around the baseline fundamental of what I'm grateful for. Thank you, Mara. And it doesn't come without what I want to drive home for today is how often can you give yourself 5 minutes to think about what you are thinking about? And then when you're thinking about what you are thinking about, to what degree do you think about what you're thinking about? Don't just come to consciousness about, I'm not very thrilled about my fulfillment in my certain areas of life, my relationship to life, and then not change anything about it. Or agree that you're not going to change anything about it. There's, if you want to call that a level of contentment. And some people might rationally think, well, why would I be content with things I'm not content with? Well, why, if you're not going to make a change, what is there left to do? If you're going to have friction with where you're at with your career, if you're going to have friction with where you're at in your most intimate relationships, if you're going to have friction with how you feel fulfilled around life, and then I ask you, well, what are you going to do to change it? I don't know, or nothing, or not give it thought, then just be content. Otherwise, it's madness. But the idea of, I can't think rationally or logically around, if you believe fundamentally in being grateful for life, and you start there, the incremental progress that comes from that, the logical inception that sort of materializes consciously is, all right, I know I'm grateful. I prayed for this exact life I have right now. I'm here now. Maybe I should make some moves. And you got to give time. Time takes time, and it's awfully complex to go through those realities, because the work to get you back is certainly arduous and difficult, emotionally, psychologically, and mostly because the pull to return back to your stable life is always there. I don't talk about comfort or stability or inertia in a way that is intended to be neglectful of the reality that it is a difficult human experience. And it takes a lot to get you to where you're at today. But to return to the point, contentment is fine, but just stay there in that contentment. You'll find more graciousness. You'll find more humility. You'll find more accountability and responsibility. Like, these words are things we shouldn't just dismiss from the human experience. You are, at minimum, you are accountable for who you are and where you are, regardless of what occurs and what happens to you. And so how do you want to manage that for yourself? That's what it comes down to for me. This is a self-management experience. When do I give myself time? And then what I talk about, and why I talked about when you're in the car or in a space where you don't reach for something. If you reach for something that distracts you, then you'll constantly be reaching to be distracted. And the more you're distracted, the more you ignore yourself, the more you remove yourself from the contentment for your life. The more you remove yourself from the possibility of having a solution to change any one of the experiences you're having in your life. If you don't want to change it, fine, be content. If you don't want to be content with where you're at, then change it. Very simple practice I go through. I do it every single day. Some days I feel better about it than others, because that's just the reality of life. Some days I question why I'm even doing it. That's just the reality of life. So if we could bring this thing to a close and bring it home, what can you, if you talk about doing you, how do you do you? 5 moves, 1 consciousness, right? What can you disrupt today? Disruption is easy. Give yourself 5 minutes. At some point today, sit down in complete silence. 5 minutes, set a timer, disrupt yourself. Go somewhere where it can just be you. The car I reference is great because you're boxed in. Close the windows, chill. You go into the restroom, you close the door, no phone. Give yourself 5 minutes to disrupt your thought patterns. Then you want to own it, right? Own what you're thinking for those 5 minutes. I just read this morning that the consciousness is a consistent stream, and that the thoughts you think that bring you to a complete sentence all have to precede and succeed one another. But you'll find that when you start to give yourself time to think alone, you'll have a lot of these contrasting thoughts. That's fine. Just let the thoughts flow and own that they are yours, but they don't have to be the period, exclamation mark on your thoughts, right? Just simply own the fact that you are a thinking thing, and start the process of owning how you start to think about what you think about. Then you yield. As you are disrupting, as you are owning these things, yield and begin to understand what the thoughts are doing to you. Experience the experience of the emotional experience of life. It's okay. It's okay to feel enlightened in certain things and inspired in certain things. And it's okay to feel a little bit uncomfortable with things and not exactly where you want to be. You wouldn't know one without the other, but yield to the reality that when it gets really emotionally high in a way that feels conflicting and uncomfortable, that you sort of have to stay there. You don't. That's where you start to observe. Observation is important. I say this all the time about observation. Study yourself. You're the best thing you could do for yourself is just to simply do you and study what you are and what you are doing and what you are not doing. If you are observing what is constantly happening, and if you're making changes regularly, even to your thoughts, observe the impact. If you give yourself time over time and you give time, those 5 simple minutes throughout the course of a day, all of a sudden, I'm telling you, how many of you had goals January 1st? Where are you January 31st? Just a question. Have you observed that? Or are you still talking about January 1 the way you talked about, or January 31 the way you talked about January 1, and nothing really has shifted in between that? Make some observations. Understand why you have or have not. That's critical to what you do and don't do going forward. Then, of course, unleash. As far as unleashing, the easiest thing to do is to always move anyway. When you come to a friction point and a decision point, don't sort of narrate where you may or may not go, what direction you may or may not want to go in. Go. And you might start left and wind up right. You might start right and wind up left. The idea is to unleash anyway. Movement creates friction. The body will go even if the mind tells it not to, right? If you force it. There's a reality in consciousness too. The analogy the gentleman gave, I don't know if it was Bars or William James. The idea between, if you think about when you're about to wake up, the alarm clock goes off, and it's now the idea is, do I get up, right? If it's a very cold day, like it was 0 degrees by me, the conscious instinct is to stay in the bed where it's warm. But there's some point we all know we have to get up. There's that breaking point. If you think about what you think about when you have to get up, the idea is that you probably really didn't think. You just, boom, you reacted, you got up. Excuse me. The significance being, when the idea strikes you, move. Just move. The more you sort of train yourself to do that and respond in that way, you unleash movement anyway, then the more you can move through your thoughts. And you could think about, I didn't really want to get up after you got up. I do that all the time. I wake up, thank you, God, I'm alive today. And we all know this sort of the clocks, the way it works. I forget the exact term of it. But your biological clock goes off, not biological, Jesus, whatever it is, it goes off. I wake up 3 a.m. without having to think about it, right? So if I just wake up, and sometimes I get up at 2:45, I'm like, those 15 minutes are not going to do me anything. I'm mad at myself, but I'm up. I'm getting dressed. Thank you, God, I'm alive today. Thank you, God, I'm alive today. At that point, you're up. You get what I'm saying? So unleash that movement. Make it a priority for your life, to make you a constant priority for your life, and do the things that prioritize your life. Simple practice. I hope it works for you if this made it to you. Mara, it's so great to see you. I hope you stay blessed. I'm sure I'll see you again. I appreciate you taking the time, as always, to contribute, and I'm happy to hear you're doing good. As always, change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich.